Over 70 years of teaching experience.
More than 12,000 graduates.
One of the largest theological library.
Multicultural student body.
Qualified and experienced national and international faculty.
Special focus on developing skills in spiritual formation.
Tailor-made curriculum for everyone and anyone.
Blended learning methods.
Are you the one who has the passion, drive, and willingness to join this elite community?
Join Hindustan Bible Institute and College to be developed as God-class transformational leaders. Let's change the world.
Wanting to make a difference with your life? We want to invite you to come and join Hindustan Bible Institute and College, where we can pour into your life that you may be developed into what we call a God-class transformational leader to change the world with His love.
The topic for this evening is Ezekiel for a ministry of restoration, positive psychology analysis of Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 to 14. The significant things that we are trying to look at is like exploring the connection between Ezekiel prophetical ministry and the positive psychology. Examines prophet's call, ministry, as well as the vision of dry bones and how these relate to positive psychology concepts like positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, and achievements. This interdisciplinary approach aims to contribute to the interpretation of the Bible, the application of positive psychology principles in restoration and holistic transformation. See, nutshell, this vision is a symbolic narrative of restoration and revival amidst despair and destruction. A contemporary model emphasizing well-being through hope, purpose, and engagement. That's what all about positive psychology framework is. And what are the important things that we are going to look at the couple of minutes from now? It's bridging biblical theology with psychological insights to inspire holistic transformation. This is the structure of my paper this evening, is to understand Ezekiel, the brief overview, and introducing the approaches, and introducing the positive psychology, and trying to analyze positive psychology lens the book of Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1 to 14, and the theological or contemporary implications. We'll be looking at the background, life, and call and commission, and Ezekiel dry bones from the scholar's perspective. See, we have to look at the historical background. Ezekiel ministered during the Babylonian exile, offering hope to the displaced and distracted people. He was part of Saducean priesthood. He was trained as a priest, but he carried out his ministry in exile as a prophet, a transitional prophet. A prophetic mission involves symbols, acts, visions, emphasizing the restoration and revival. The call is associated with the vision, and his commission is associated with God commissioning him to speak to the rebellious people. And the consecration is intersecting the part of his commission. Now, there are some psychological aspects, the personality of Ezekiel. Ezekiel personality reflects like bilocation, symbolic action, intense visions. God takes him to Jerusalem, God takes him to dry bones, and so on and so forth. So bilocation aspect is there. And some of these scholars look at his psychoanalysis, like a neurological or psychological condition influences. And his lifestyle, in the midst of all controversies, he was able to withstand. Looking at the chapter 24, his lifestyle, where he is losing his wife. In spite of that, he was able to move forward, the resilience. Now, the scholar's perspectives on Ezekiel vision of dry bones. The Jerome commentary states that it is a vision or a trance. Like scholars like Sini talks about, is a resurrection metaphor. And Bloch talks about it is a national restoration or resurrection. Then also the Foser, he talks about it's like a trauma, wherein you have the psychological impact in a Babylonian exile itself. And some other scholars talk about it is like a post-traumatology, where it is a state of recovery. And also people do talk about cultural symbolism. So these are some of the scholars' perspective with regard to Ezekiel's life and his mission and its relation to the positive psychology, wherein we are going to look at. Before we get into positive psychology, it is very important for us to understand some of the biblical approaches. How do we read the Bible? There are text-based approaches and reader-based approaches. The text-based approaches is all about behind the text and in the text. The reader is all about the before the text. So the key-based approaches, they analyze the origin, the structure, while reader-based methods engage the reader's context and experience. These are two important things, text-based and reader-based. So how it is connected to positive psychology. Before we get engaged into positive psychology, it is very important for us to understand how it is related to psychological biblical criticism. The BBC uses psychological theories to analyze mental process and behavior in the Bible text. Bridges theology and psychology for holistic biblical interpretation. The goal of this paper is examining the text creation, models of expression, and the influence of the human life. It provides insight to the world behind the text, within the text, and in front of the text. Behind the text, within the text, and in front of the text. Now, several scholars had talked about this psychological, biblical criticism or framework. Now, Friedrich Schleiermacher talks about linking the grammatical and psychological analysis, which will give a deeper understanding. When William James talks about, no, it's all about emotional and psychological dynamics, which will developly influencing a person. And Paul Ricoeur talks about, it's all about explanation, understanding, and appropriation. Carl Jung talks about the psyche role. I'll explain a little more about it. He talks about dream analysis, like a subconscious stage wherein you have a dream. How does it influence? And talks about authentic self, and talks about myth and narratives, how it compares, for example, narratives to explore human psyche and spirituality within the biblical text, how far it influences. Symbolism, interpret the biblical words and ideas as carriers of deep psychological meaning, because it is being presented in a context, and a context gives us a pathway to understand how a psychological movements have taken place. Wherein we read the text, we have to also understand the context in which it has written. Therefore, as we try to read the context, we also need to understand one of the dimensions, which is a psychological dimension. Now, Paul Ricoeur very wonderfully pointed out, it says what the text says, what the text talks about, what the text owns in itself. So these are some of the important things that we are looking at from the approaches point of view. Now, put it in a nutshell, the psychological biblical criticism is nothing but integrating psychological theories with biblical analysis to uncover deeper insights. Now, we have looked at the Schleiermacher, Carl Jung, and Sigmund Freud, emphasizing the psychological dimension of the biblical text. Now, the positive psychology influences the shift from the unconscious process to the promotion of human flourishing and well-being. Now, let's look at the important part of our class is all about understanding positive psychology with the lens of BBC, the psychological biblical criticism, in which you understand the significance of the positive psychological analysis, which we are going to do in the next session. Before we get into that, it is important to understand the positive psychology itself. Now, the two important, the pioneers or the founders, we understand the Seligman and Peter Wong. And we have the concepts of well-being like Edonia or Eudaimonia or Brahma model, which I'll be explaining at this moment. Now, what is positive psychology all about? Positive psychology is scientific study of the factors that enable individuals and community to flourish, to move on, to thrive. So what is the focus? The focus is nothing but shift from the mental illness to strength and happiness and flourishing. It's not talking about a pathology, rather it talks about the positive psychology. No longer talking about the negative aspect, looking at the positive aspect of life. And now the historical roots like the William James and Abraham Maslow also had contributed and also served as a pioneer for the positive psychology. Now, if you look at William James, he emphasized the subjective perspectives on human experience as a core to psychology. Maslow, as we are already aware, he talks about the needs, the psychological needs. Carl Rogers talks about fully functioning life as embracing life challenge and taking responsibility. So these three are the pioneers of this positive psychology. Now, Martin Seligman, he talks about flourishing happiness, like human flourishing. So he focuses on happiness and human strength. But Paul Venn talks about little different than. He says he involves a suffering. Now, his idea is without suffering, there is no flourishing. But Seligman says you give emphasis on flourishing, just negate a little bit about the suffering. Not totally negating, but to a certain extent. So highlighting the interplay of adversary and well-being as essential for them. Now, let's look at some of the other scholars as well who have talked about this positive psychology. You can see the happiness, resilience, and human strength along with Seligman, Duckworth joined with, and he also contributed. But Christopher Peterson defined positive psychology as a study of what goes right in life and makes life worth. So what is essential point of discussion is all about addressing the fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and goal in one's life. Now, along with that, one of the important things the positive psychology talks about well-being. The definition of well-being is all about happiness, growth, health, and societal contribution. And also it relates with a personal growth. Being includes development potential. It is not unity alone, and so on and so forth. So individual, family, community, society, and so it involves in order to give a better perspective. Now, when we think about the community well-being, the two aspects, one is called eudaimonia and another is called idonia. Idonia talks about pleasure, pleasure seeking. You can be flourishing, you can be happy in your life by pleasure. And eudaimonia is an Aristotle perspective. He says about a purpose, having a purpose, meaning, hope in a life that makes you to live better. The sense of worthness, sense of, a sense of belonging, and so on and so forth. He would be talking about in order to inculcate the purpose and the plan and the meaning of life. Now, the distinct is that both dimensions contribute to this holistic view of well-being as far as the psychological perspective is concerned. Now, one of the important things for our discussion is a PERMA model. The PERMA model is nothing but positive emotions, engagements, relationship, meaning, and accomplishments. Now, let's look at what do you mean by the positive emotions. The positive emotions includes joy, gratitude, hope, compassion, and love. And the role is helps these principles or these criteria in which we are moving to would definitely create a pathway to move on, and it will create us to progress, and it would cultivate the emotional well-being wherein we will able to see flourishing. Well, life is automatically going to be flourishing and you will see the happiness. This is one of the concepts of PERMA model. And we also do have the meaning. The meaning is nothing but finding out the purpose in life. And the fifth one is all about accomplishment. Now, accomplishment is all about achievement, competence, performance, and approach goals, and so on and so forth. Now, this creates when you are achieving, when you are accomplishing, when you are fulfilling, when you are able to move on the path of advisory and achieve the goal, it's all about you are winning the game in which you will be able to see your well-being. That's the idea about it. Now, we already discussed about it. Now, other important things about this positive psychology is about character strength and virtues. We're not going to deal about it. However, I'm just going to give as 24 strengths have been categorized as wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. This is the other part of positive psychology dimension, but we will be placing those elements in our analysis, but we are not diving deep into that classification as such. Now, let's move on to the positive psychology analysis of the book of Ezekiel with the background that we have received. We have received the little idea about this Ezekiel and his connection with the psychology and psychoanalysis and psychotherapies and psychiatric perspectives from different views. Then we have discussed about the biblical approaches, how the approaches are being used, text-based, reader-based, and how this psychological biblical criticism has come into existence in order to help us to know behind the text, in the text, and in front of the text, and how this part, the positive psychology, within that framework, because the psychology talks about a pathology and finding a solution to the pathology, but positive psychology is negating that pathology and trying to address some of the positive elements that you have in order to have a well-being. That's the important thing. So with that analysis, with that perspective, we are going to look at Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 to 14. So I just categorized my given portion as this: a sovereignty authority of God amidst death and despair, verse 1 and 2. Submission to the authority of God, and verse 3. And speaking to the bones with authority of God, verse 4 to 8. Speaking to the spirit with authority of God, verse 9 to 10. Speaking to his people with authority of God, verse 11 to 14. Let us look at that. Now, the positive psychology, as we try to understand, vision symbolizes renewal and restoration of life. Now, what is the role of the word of God? God commands and transforms despair into vitality. What is interpretation? Now, explain God's providence in bringing exile back to Israel. That is the idea. Now, putting a little more closer to our understanding, from traditional to positive psychology, there is a shift from mental process to well-being and flourishing. Now, biblical text is a tool for growth, explores how scripture inspires resilience and meaning in life, and implication for hermeneutics is integrates theme of joy, hope, fulfillment in the interpretation. Now, we are using this positive psychology analysis as a theoretical framework. There is a difference between a conceptual framework and theoretical framework. And as far as our class, our discussion, our paper presentation, our webinar is concerned, it is all about looking at the theoretical frame. Now, look at verse 1 and 2, the sovereign authority of God amid death and despair. Now, if you look at this particular verse, the two important things are used. Yod, Hebrew, the Yod, the hand of God, and Ruha, the spirit of God. Two had been used here. Now, the hand of God is nothing but is a power and authority in the time of distress, disappointment, and destruction. Now, this hand of God is used in the Old Testament in several other places as a judgment. But here it is used as a redemption, as a restoration, bringing the people to the fold of God. Now, the Spirit of God here is used like spirit, breath, wind, and demonstrates the God's living power, God breathing power, recreating power. What is psychological analysis? Reveals the resilience through divine intervention, transforming dislocation into hope. Parallels like in Rome chapter verse 8 and 11, we may be able to understand how Paul is addressing to the Gentiles and the Jews, the context in which he was trying to create a positivity. Now let's move on to this PARMA model, which is very important for our discussion. Now, the PARMA model is thinking about positive emotions here is divine hand brings comfort. Now, multiple meaning of Ruwa inspires hope. The engagement is now the prophet as a deep immersion into divine vision experience. Now, flow through the prophetic engagement. The relationship, it's all about divine and the human. Now, the spirit mediates the transformative relationship. What is the meaning? Now, the meaning is very simple here. Now, the prophet understands divine empowerment is something beyond his comprehension. Having understood that divine empowerment is beyond his comprehension, that itself is the meaning in which he is able to move. And accomplishment is nothing but achievement of human wisdom, accomplishment through surrender. Now, complete well-being emerges when divine power and meets a spiritual renewal, creating a multi-dimensional experience of the transformation that touches the aspect of human life. 2. The submission to the authority of God amid the death, despair. The Son of Man, verse 3, is used. Now, the Son of Man is very important phrase that we see here. Now, emphasizing Ezekiel's role as a mediator for divine messages. Now, the question comes from the divine God here is saying, Ezekiel, can this bone come to life? The answer from the Ezekiel is very simple. Lord, you know. This reflects submission, faith, and recognition of human limitation. Now, the Hebrew word edah, No, it's not about a person comes in, he is in a time of perplexity. He is in a time of confusion. And in the midst of that, admitting his perplexity and acknowledging the sovereignty of God, acknowledging the greatness of God. That's where we understand here the second important principle of the PERMA model. Now you can understand here the positive emotions. Now, humble acceptance brings inner peace, trust in divine knowledge, yielding to greater wisdom. That's the positive emotions for the prophet to engage in the process. Engagement is full presence and human divine dialogue. Relationship is intimate simply because he creates a kind of a movement, Lord, It is all about trust-based relationship. Meaning is understanding human limitation as meaningful, deeper meaning through humble submission. Accomplishments, experience of divine power, bringing change, successful spiritual transportation and vision. Now, the true flourishing emerges when human limitations meet divine possibilities, creating a space where humble acknowledgement, becomes the foundation for profound well-being and purposeful. Number 3, with authority and death. Look at here, this particular year, prophecy, a command. Now, Ezekiel is asked or commanded to speak to those. You can see the 3-stage restoration. It's all about hearing, breathing, and reviving. Now, the Spirit of God, Druha, emphasizing a divine creative power and vitality. Now, Yahweh is here. He is going to restore and recreate the life which does not have any hope at all. Now, the transformation here, the prophet transit experience and trends like hope. Now, very important to look at how God relates that. Now, it's not God relates the people have to look at the bone, but people are the dry bones. That's the indication here. With that perspective, let us look at the PERMA model. Here, prophetic empowerment begins confidence to prophet. The creative power is engaging in the positive emotions. Now, when we talk about engagement, is active prophetic speaking demonstrating flow, wherein he was engaging with God, the Yahweh. That was the engagement in the previous PERMA model. But here he is demonstrating, he is speaking out. And again, he is engaging into a 3-stage process, which requires full participation, which requires a complete engagement. And the relationship is not divine alone. No, human is also engaging in the process. Human and divine partnership in prophecy or fulfillment of the prophecy. Now, meaning is the clear purpose in prophetic role. Yeah, a priest who was trained in a good way of doing rituals, seeing a catastrophe, seeing a calamity, seeing a different scenario in which he engages himself, understanding the meaning of the life and serving as a prophet is something amazing. Now, shall know that he is Yahweh. The meaning is Yahweh should be known. That is the important thing. Accomplishment is wide, visible transformation of bones, the fulfillment of divine instruction. A complete well-being emerges through the combination of prophetic purpose, divine partnership, and the third level is the staged transformation. These 3 things are very important in this model as we look at third one. The fourth one is speaking to the Spirit with authority of God. Now, verse 9 to 10, the prophecy to the Spirit. Now, look at this particular thing. God commands Ezekiel to invoke the Spirit, demonstrating divine sovereignty and life-giving power. Now you can see the 4 winds, now symbolizing the 4 direction, a complete direction. Now the wind and the Spirit comes into the process. Now we can understand here the 2-step process of reconstitution and revival. Now we will be able to see in Genesis 2:7, the creation account, in which you see the 2 processes. Now, what is the psychological insights? Now, parallel post-traumatic growth, collective resilience, and environmental mastery in the positive psychology. Now, in this particular aspect, we may be able to look at the PERMA model, which is something very unique. Before we going to do, let me summarize the 4th aspect of our presentation on positive psychological analysis. Divine sovereign in action. Now, the spirit breath revives the corpse, emphasizing God's omnipotence and transformative power. Now, the spirit, the role of Ruah, reflects Yahweh's life-giving force, both breath and wind. And vision of exiles, the exiles are, no, they're victims, and they are for divine judgment. But God engages, involves, and changes the perspective. Now, the metaphor for the post-traumatic growth is represents a structured process of recovery, meaning-making after profound despair. Now, it is like you are going to have a meaning right after the despair, which has not been considered thus far. Now, Karma model, it's all about positive engagement is a transformation from death to life. Four winds metaphor suggests a complete renewal or creating positivity, optimism. Now, engagement is now the prophet full involvement in speaking, and life demonstrates a deep engagement. Now, as I pointed already, it's a two-stage revival process helps him to engage a little more. Now, relationship, it's all about collective healing of community because the bones are getting joined, interconnected. The meaning is clear purpose in the prophetic role, significance found in participating in divine restoration, and deeper understanding of life revival process. An accomplishment is a progressive achievement in two-stage revival. Success in the transformation from death to life. Now, complete well-being emerges when divine purpose meets human participation, creating meaningful transformation that impacts both individual and communities. The last portion of our analysis, speaking to his people with authority of God. Now he speaks to the people. Three dimensions we can look at the prophecy. It's number one is cry, the cry of despair. People lament, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, and we are cut off. No, it talks about the hopelessness, the state of hopelessness. Now the symbolism, dry bones here, represents Israel's vitality and stability destroyed by exile. Now metaphor is lament connects to Ezekiel's vision as both a reflection of suffering and source of prophetic inspiration. Number two is command. Now God's command is to deliver the people of God. Now it's promising opening of the graves. Tomb symbolizes the captivity and despair, contrasting with the life and freedom through the God's intervention. Now the promise of return, God promises to bring the exile back to the land, evoking imagery of new Exodus. Now, new creation is seen here, new Exodus seen here. The first thing of the fourth part is all about command. Second part is all about command. The first part is all about cry. And the last one is about compassion. Now, God's compassion affirms the covenant with Israel, emphasizing grace and love rather than merit. No, it's not about people merit. It is all about grace of God. And the spirit within God promises spirit in the people, reflecting inner renewal and fulfillment of covenant promises. It's important to see the inner renewal. Inner renewal leads to restoration. It's not just alone the national restoration, but the inner renewal. Now combines the divine compassion and human acknowledgement to enable identity and hope restoration. Now, the final Perma model for the verse 11 to 14. Hope emerges from despair. Engagement, active participation, restoration. Relationship. Now, no longer people are thrown away. No longer people are, overlooked, but they are now my people. Covenantal renewal. Meaning is nothing but purpose restored through divine promise. Accomplishment is a complete transformation or complete restoration, as say. So the passage effective highlights all Parma elements, including positive emotions, active participation, restoration, covenantal renewal, meaning, accomplishments indicate a complete transformation achieved through divine promise. As I brought before I could commence the positive psychology analysis, this is a theoretical framework in which we are trying to look at this particular passage. Now, what are the implications that we can get? Say I have some implications here. Now with this, we can get some implications here is commencing godly leadership attitude, consecrating to fulfill the demands of God, creating vigor and vitality, constructing unity in vertical and horizontal dimension, consecrating the value of life and consecrating the contemporary cosmos, restoring identity, restoring human dignity, restoring humanity in God. Let's look at it. Now, Ezekiel was a shepherd Ezekiel was called to be a watchman. Now, here we understand the godly leadership is taking care of. Now, throughout this vision, we may able to look at this concept, how the role of prophet was as a shepherd. Now, his prophetic message translated divine promises into tangible hope, ignited renewal faith among the desperate. Now, Ezekiel leadership encouraged a proactive engagement, inspiring Israelites to embody restoration principles in their lives in the time of distress and disappointments. Number one. So, this implication today, God is calling us to be a godly leader and inculcating godly leaders' attitudes. Second is demands, fulfilling the demands of God. No, restoration does not come as we think. No, Ezekiel's role in restoration is the best demonstrated in extraordinary obedience to God, strict commands. Looking at chapter 1 to 48, very particularly chapter 1 to 24, we may able to find several ways God is instructing. A demand was so high wherein he was not able to place the demands. In spite of that, he was able to fulfill the demands of God. So consecrating to fulfill the demands of God. So how the restoration will take place, it's all about consecrating ourselves to fulfill the demand. Third is creating vigor and vitality. Prophetic ministry emphasizes submission to God, essential for regenerating life and hopeless spirits. Now, he was able to inculcate a vigor and vitality in the midst of broken communities, in the midst of broken world, which is very important, which we are called to engage with, creating vigor and vitality in the society. The fourth one is creating vertical and horizontal dimension. Now, positive psychology may engage in the process of the horizontal dimension, but when we come to the biblical point of view, it is all about vertical and the horizontal dimension in which we are called. We're called, the church has been called to bring unity, Now, the unity is one of the important key principles in order to bring restoration or reformation or transformation. That's what we see in the dry bones. Fifthly, is very important, the value of the life. Now, look at this particular book, highlighting the despair of those exiles. They lost the temple. They had no place to worship. Now, they live a new life God provides to people, involves holiness, new heart, and new spirit. Now, in the time of despair, God is able to do something dramatic, and God is creating a new spirit, new heart, and new life where there is no time, where is no place to worship. So, inculcating the value of the life is very important. The restoration in the society that we may bring today, it's all about inculcating a process of sense of worth. Is there a price for life? Is there a worth for life? Is a question that should be placed in order to bring the eschatology to. It's not an earthly perspective, but the eternal perspective. The Christian life, it is not earthly, it is eternal. Now, the dry bones symbolizes not just earthly perspective, but the heavenly perspective, which is very important for us to inculcate as we create a kind of a community. It's very important cultivating eschatological. Sixth one, which is very important, addressing the crisis today. We see several crises, modern displacement, parallel Ezekiel's vision, emphasizing community resilience and hope in the midst of global changes. Today, we see a lot of things, a global crisis, war. We do see war. We are aware of it. We look at the Indian context, the northeastern context, where we see a lot of wars, natural catastrophe. People are dislocated. People are moved away from the land. What is our concern today is an important question. People's life has been personified. This life has been a symbol of dry bones. Maybe individuals. When we take about individuals, it's all about psychological dimension, social dimension, cultural dimension, and spiritual dimensions. They are away. They are like dry. The family, the familial gathering is not there. Dryness. Community, society, national-wise, we have several issues. We may not discuss at this moment, but we are all of us are aware of what is happening in India and the global. Let us think about concerning the cosmos. And I have three important points that I want to say. Restoring identity in the midst of that. Psychological impacts of displacement lead to acute identity loss, eroding individual sense of self-worth. It's very important for us to restoring identity. Now, Prophet Ezekiel was engaging in the process of restoring. And God was engaging in the life of prophet, and prophet was engaging into the life of the people. And that's where the creation of identity, or restoring identity, or cultivating identity within us is important. Now, prophetic voice is something demanding today. And restoring human dignity. Ezekiel emphasizes inherent human dignity, affirming marginalized individuals. Now we have subalterns, marginalized, a group of people. Now we need to look at, is there a voice from the edges? How am I going to respond to the voice from the edges? Oh, our bones are broken and we are wretched people. These are the voice that comes out. Now, voice from the edges. Are we able to listen the voice within the lines, in between the lines? These are some of the important questions about bringing the divine place in the lives of individuals, a divine nature, human dignity in the life of individuals. And lastly, it's all about restoring humanity in God, connecting to God, instill hope and purpose, empowering individuals to pursue meaning and revitalization efforts. It's all about a person should be able to find the essence of God. That is important. When he is not able to find the essence of God is something very different. Now, Ezekiel, when we understand, he was able to move into lives of people in terms of the prophetical voice, and people were able to acknowledge, people were able to know the limitations and able to acknowledge the sovereignty of God. That is where the important, we have fallen. So that is where we have to look at the experience, the divine love enhances human relationship, foster deeper social, cultural connections and communal supports and mechanisms. Now, faith facilitates transformative interaction, driving humanity towards collective identity grounded in divine. Lastly, I want to conclude with this. Now, prophecy acts as a bridge allowing God to convey his intentions for hope and restoration. Ezekiel emphasized God's transformative presence, nurturing deep hope and restoration within the community spiritual identity. Restoration in Ezekiel nurtures psychological resilience, enables individuals to navigate trauma through communal support systems. A church today is called to actively embody restoration principles, advocating for societal healing, community empowerment, and holistic transformation. We are called to be a new Ezekiel to our society, shaping our purposes, informing, involving, inspiring, influencing, impacting our actions within the community towards the restoration and the holistic transformation. Thank you so much for the patience.